What if I told you that you can ask God for anything at all, and He would say yes? Would you ask for money, fame, a platform, or would you ask for wisdom? That's what Solomon did. And not only did God say yes, He gave him even more than he asked for. Solomon had the kind of wisdom that made nations listen, the kind that made kings and queens travel across deserts just to sit in his presence and ask him questions. He wrote Proverbs. He built the temple. He brought peace and prosperity to a kingdom his father had only dreamed of stabilizing. He had it all. But what do you do when what you prayed for becomes what you're praised for? And the praise starts to feel better than the presence of God. What happens when wisdom isn't the issue, but compromise is? Today, we're going deep into the story of Solomon, the rise, the reign, and the slow unraveling. Because if we're not careful, we can have the right words, the right gifts, and still let our hearts turn away from the one who gave it all to us in the first place. This isn't just the story of a king. It's a warning of every person building for God, but quietly compromising with the world. Keep listening because this is the kind of wisdom that might save your calling. Before Solomon ever asked God for wisdom, his father David pulled him aside and said something every father should say to his son. Be strong, show yourself a man. Observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience, keep his decree and commands, so that you may prosper in all you do. 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 2 through 3. David wasn't just handing over a throne, he was handing over legacy. He was saying, son, this only works if you stay close to God. So when Solomon steps into leadership, he remembers that. And when God shows up in a dream and says, ask me for anything, Solomon doesn't ask for what most men would. He doesn't ask for military strength or wealth or fame. He says, give me a discerning heart to govern your people, to know right from wrong. 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 9. He knew he couldn't lead like his father unless he leaned on the same source. Because Solomon didn't ask for something to benefit himself, he asked for something that would help him serve others better. And God said, since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, I will give you a wise and discerning heart like no one before or after you. Then God adds, and I will give you what you didn't ask for, both wealth and honor. That's how good God is. When your motives are pure, He'll give you more than what you prayed for. He'll bless you in areas you didn't even mention because your heart posture pleased Him. See, Solomon's story starts with the kind of prayer most of us forget to pray. We ask God to fix people, to open doors, to bless opportunities. But when's the last time we asked God, Lord, make me wise enough to handle what you've already given me? Because sometimes the real test isn't getting blessed, it's having the character to keep it. Back then, Solomon's request was rare. Today, it still is, because in a world where we're taught to secure the bag, boss up, manifest success. How often do you hear someone praying for wisdom? And if they do pray for it, is it for genuine reasons? We're asking for stages, not strategy, followers, not faithfulness, influence, not integrity. But what if the thing you're missing isn't another door to open? It's the wisdom to manage the doors God already opened. Solomon teaches us that what you pray for reveals what you value. And sometimes God doesn't delay a blessing because he's punishing you. He's protecting you from a level you don't have the wisdom for yet. Ask yourself, have you been asking God for something, but not asking him for the wisdom to steward it? Because elevation without wisdom isn't a blessing, it's a setup. Before the queen ever came, before the palace was finished, before the temple even broke ground, there was a moment that let everyone know this king is different. Two women came before Solomon with one baby, both claiming to be the mother. No witnesses, no DNA test, just a room full of tension and a throne in the middle. Solomon listens, then says something shocking. Bring me a sword. We'll divide the child in two. One woman says, fine. The other cries out, no, give her the baby, just don't kill him. And just like that, Solomon knew she's the real mother. That moment spread like wildfire. It was the first time the people saw his wisdom in action, and they feared the king because they knew the wisdom of God was in him. 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 28. When Solomon began building the temple, he did it with purpose, passion, and extravagance. Gold everywhere, fine cedar, precious stones. It took 7 years to complete. But here's a small detail most people miss. At the top of the temple, two front pillars, Jason and Boaz, were capitals shaped like open lilies. 1 Kings chapter 7 verse 22. These elaborate flower designs were so high up that no one could really see them clearly except God. It's like Solomon was saying, some beauty is just for you, Lord. Are we still creating things in secret that only God sees? Or are we building what only gets likes? That temple said, I honor God whether anyone's watching or not. When Solomon built the temple, he didn't cut corners. He didn't just build for function, he built for glory. And at the very top of the two front pillars, so high up, no one on the ground could even see the details. He had them shaped like lilies. 1 Kings chapter 7 verse 22. Delicate, detailed, and completely hidden from public view. Why? Because not everything he built was for man's eyes. Some things were for God alone, and that is worship. But now, we live in a world that has reversed that posture. Today, we build for people. We post everything. We share our quiet time, our worship sessions, our journal pages, even our prayer closets have ring lights and hashtags. We created a culture where if it's not visible, we wonder if it's valuable. But Solomon would say, The most beautiful parts of what I built were the parts no one saw. Real talk. Are you building lilies or just live streams? Are you still willing to give God your best, even if no one sees it? Or does it only count to you if it gets engagement? We say, I'm doing it for God. But if God told you not to post it, would you still do it? What if the most powerful part of your calling is the part no one ever applauds, but heaven does? What are your lilies in your life? Those things done just for God's eyes. Is your obedience driven by reverence or by appreciation? Are you decorating your temple for people or for the King of Glory? Because Solomon's temple teaches us something the modern church desperately needs to remember. True worship is when you're willing to build beauty where only God can see it. Some of the most anointed parts of your life will never go viral, they'll just go straight to heaven. When the Queen of Sheba arrived, she didn't come empty handed. She brought gold, spices, hard questions. But what she found left her speechless. The food, the servants, the burnt offerings, the staircase leading to the temple. And she said, the report I heard wasn't even half the truth. How happy your men must be to stand in your presence and hear your wisdom daily. 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 7 through 8. She didn't just compliment Solomon, she praised his God. That's kingdom leadership. Back then, Solomon's wisdom built empires and drew nations. Today, wisdom still builds, but not everyone's building for God. Some of us are chasing clout while calling it favor. Solomon reminds us that wisdom should show. It should shape how we lead, how we serve, how we speak, how we build. You say God gave you a gift. Let's see it in your discipline, in your home, in your relationship, in your order. Wisdom leaves evidence. If someone tested your walk with God today, the way the Queen of Sheba tested Solomon, what would they find? Would they see order, honor, excellence, or would they see chaos covered in spiritual language? You don't have to announce God gave you wisdom. People will come from far just to sit near it. Even Jesus mentioned Solomon. Generations later, Jesus himself referenced Solomon's greatness. He said, consider how the lilies of the field grow. Not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. Matthew chapter 6, verse 28 through 29. That's Jesus saying, yes, Solomon was glorious, but even he couldn't match the way my Father clothes his creation. And that's the message. Don't chase the glory, chase the God who gives it. Because even Solomon's best can't compare to what God does for those he loves. What are you building that glorifies God even if no one ever sees it but him? Would your life, your home, your content, your character make the Queen of Sheba say, God is real? You don't have to tell people you're wise. Wisdom makes God visible. For years, Solomon ruled with excellence. The temple stood tall. The kingdom flourished. His wisdom made Israel the envy of the nations. But somewhere along the way, he stopped living what he knew. He didn't just drift, he disobeyed a direct warning from God. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, "You must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts away after their gods." Yet Solomon held fast to them in love. 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 1 through 2. Solomon didn't slip. He clung to what God said to let go. He married women he was commanded to avoid. He let what he felt override what God had spoken. This wasn't a surprise. Solomon knew the law. Back in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 17, God made it crystal clear when laying out his guidelines for future kings. He must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. He must not accumulate large amounts of gold and silver. That's 2 strikes. Solomon did both and still built altars to the gods of his wives. God's presence didn't leave because Solomon sinned once. It left because he kept choosing sin after he knew better. It didn't begin with idol worship. It began with permission, with soft compromises. It's just marriage, it's political. It's just one altar, it keeps the peace. It's not like I'm actually bowing down. But compromises never stay small. The wisest man in the world who wrote, "Guard your heart," stopped guarding his own, and the kingdom started to fracture long before the throne did. The danger of knowing the truth but not living it. This is where it gets real. Solomon didn't just preach wisdom, he penned it. He wrote Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. He even wrote, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. But the tragedy is that he stopped living what he taught. He still looked like a king, still functioned in his role, still had influence and favor, but inside, the connection to God was eroding. He was wise with his mind, but disobedient with his heart. This is us if we're not careful. We can build a ministry and be worshiping idols behind the scenes. You can lead people to truth while drifting in private. You can ask for wisdom and still lose your way if you stop submitting your heart daily. Solomon's fall didn't come because he lacked knowledge. It came because he lacked surrender. Knowledge without obedience is just ego in a spiritual costume. What has God already told you not to touch? Where are you holding fast to? He told you to release. What area of your life are you justifying in the name of peace, love, or comfort? But deep down, you know it's disobedience. Because here's the truth. God is not impressed with your wisdom if your heart is divided. He's not moved by what you built if it cost you the intimacy you once had with him. He clung to the very thing God told him would destroy him. And even worse, as Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God. 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 4. This man who built God's temple, prayed fire from heaven, and received divine wisdom, started worshiping idols, not just tolerating, participating. He followed Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Syrians, and Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. He even built a high place for Chemosh and Molech on a hill in east of Jerusalem. 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 5 through 7. Molech, the god associated with child sacrifice. Ashtoreth, goddess of sexual immorality and perversion. Chemosh, worship through grotesque pagan rituals. Can you imagine it? The same hands that built the house of God, and can you imagine it? The same hands that built the house of God are now building altars to demons? The same mouth that asked God for wisdom is now blessing idols. It's unthinkable, but it shows us something terrifying. You can see God. You can walk in wisdom. You can be used by God in massive ways and still lose your way if your heart isn't guarded. And let's not forget, Solomon didn't just have wisdom, he had encounters. God appeared to him twice. 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 9. He heard God's voice. He felt God's presence. He saw fire fall from heaven, and still he turned away. Why? Because he loved his wives more than he feared God. This is the danger of partial obedience or believing the lie. That could never be me. Today, we're not bowing at temples to Molech, but we're sacrificing our families for success. We're giving our hearts to relationships God never approved. We're building platforms while hiding private rebellion. Solomon's story is a warning. God's presence isn't guaranteed just because you started well. Let it hit you. Have you started to tolerate what you used to pray against? Have you let your wisdom convince you that you can handle what God already told you not to touch? Is your success making you forget who gave it to you? Solomon didn't fall all at once. He faded step by step into disobedience. And if he, the wisest man on earth, could be deceived, how much more do we need to stay desperate for God? Wisdom without surrender is empty. Building for God without guarding your heart will lead to ruin. And you're not too anointed to fall. None of us are. Before Solomon drifted, he was fully surrendered. He didn't just pray once and walk away. Solomon worshiped, he sacrificed, he prayed long and hard. He gave so much at one point that it couldn't even be counted. Solomon offered a sacrifice of fellowship offering to the Lord, 22,000 cattle and 120,000 sheep and goats. 1 Kings chapter 8 verse 63. That wasn't convenient. This was costly worship. The kind of sacrifice that said, "You are worth everything I have." Back then, Solomon gave freely, boldly, and without hesitation. He knew where his wealth came from, and he gave like he trusted the source. But now, we tip God instead of sacrificing. We hesitate to tithe while praying for overflow. We spend more on Amazon than we do on offering. We say, "God is my provider," but won't release what's in our hands. How you give reveals who you trust. Solomon's giving wasn't about money, it was about trust and worship. If you're afraid to give, you're not just broke, you're disconnected from who your provider really is. After building the temple and dedicating it with prayer, Solomon stood in front of all Israel, lifted his hands to heaven, and prayed a prayer of fire, forgiveness, mercy, and promise. 1 Kings chapter 8. And when he was done, when Solomon finished praying, fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. 2 Chronicles chapter 7 verse 1. So much glory that the priest couldn't even enter. The presence of God was thick, heavy, tangible. Solomon didn't just build a temple, he built a place for God's presence to dwell. When's the last time we built something just for God to dwell in? Solomon didn't build for clout. He built so God can dwell there. Now, we build platforms but don't invite God in. We post our quiet time more than we live it. We build content, businesses, and ministries with no room for His presence. We want the fire, but we don't want the altar. We want the glory, but we don't want to make the sacrifice. Solomon reminds us that the glory doesn't fall where there's no preparation. After all of this, God spoke to Solomon. "I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself as the temple for sacrifices. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray." 2 Chronicles chapter 7 verse 12 through 14. And God made a covenant. "I will establish your royal throne. But if you or your descendants turn away and forsake my commands, this temple will become a heap of rubble." That's how real it was. Solomon didn't just have wisdom, he had divine encounters. God moved for him, spoke to him, filled the house because of him. He didn't just sacrifice once, he did it year after year. Solomon didn't just show up once and expect results. Scripture says he led ongoing worship and sacrifices multiple times a year, according to the festivals and ordinance of the Lord. 2 Chronicles chapter 8 verse 12 through 13. He lived a life of discipline, offering structure and reverence. That's what makes his compromise so terrifying, because it shows that even people who once gave God everything can end up giving him nothing if they stopped guarding their hearts. Solomon didn't just worship once. He didn't offer one big moment and disappear. Solomon observed the festivals of the Lord and offered sacrifices regularly. 2 Chronicles chapter 8 verse 12 through 13. He kept showing up. He didn't need a miracle to worship, just remembrance. Our generation is addicted to when I feel like it faith. Now, if we don't feel God in the moment, we pull back. If the worship set isn't perfect, we fold our arms. If life gets hard, we stop going to church or reading the word. We call inconsistency grace when it's really just spiritual laziness. Solomon teaches us faithfulness is proven in repetition, not emotional reaction. Even after Solomon turned, God says something that should humble all of us. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. 1 Kings chapter 11 verse 12. Solomon had already forfeited the blessing, but God held back the judgment because of the covenant he made with David. That's a legacy. That's mercy. That's favor passed down because of someone else's faithfulness. God told Solomon, if you obey me, I'll bless you. But if you turn away, the temple you built will become rubble. 2 Chronicles chapter 7 verse 19 through 21. But even when Solomon turned away, God said, I won't tear it from you, not for your sake, but for David's. 1 Kings chapter 11 verse 12. Some of us are living off someone else's faithfulness. Some of us are walking in favor not because of our own surrender, but because of grandmother's prayer, a father's obedience, a pastor's covering. But the question is, will it continue with you, or will the blessing stop at your generation? You may have inherited the peace, but what are you passing down? When Solomon found out about Jeroboam, the man God chose to rule over part of the divided kingdom, he didn't repent. He tried to kill him. Solomon tried to kill Jeroboam, but he fled to Egypt. 1 Kings chapter 11 verse 40. Even in the end, Solomon was still clinging to control, trying to hold on to a kingdom that God had already handed to someone else. It wasn't his throne anymore. It wasn't his to protect. But instead of falling on his face, he picked up a sword. That moment showed how far his heart had drifted. Now, are you trying to keep what God's already removed? How many of us are fighting to keep relationships that God broke on purpose? Striving to grow platforms that no longer have his presence? Feeling jealous of someone else's assignment because we know we mishandled ours? Solomon didn't lose his calling because he lacked wisdom. He lost it because he stopped guarding his heart and surrendered his obedience. Solomon had it all: wisdom, wealth, power, peace. He built the temple, spoke with God. He ruled during Israel's golden era. But his story didn't end with a crown of glory. It ended with silence, disconnection, division. He started as the wisest man on earth and ended as the king who lost God's heart. There is no scene of public repentance, no broken cry like David's Psalms 51, no moment where he falls at the altar, just a slow fade. And it leaves us asking, is knowing better enough if you stop living it? Some scholars believe Ecclesiastes was Solomon's final work. An old man looking back at his life with regrets and reflection. He writes, I denied myself nothing, yet everything was meaningless. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 10 through 11. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13. Those words feels like someone who knew he wasted his best year chasing lesser things. But even then, he never says, I was wrong. He never writes, God, I return. It's heavy because it reminds us you can know what matters too late to do anything about it. How to guard your heart so you don't end up like Solomon. Guarding your heart isn't soft, it's survival. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. This isn't just a cute verse for women's conference or relationship advice. This is battlefield strategy for your soul. Your heart just isn't your emotions, it's your desires, your affections, your intentions, your will. It's the core of who you are. When God says guard it, he's saying, protect what drives you, watch what influences your direction, don't let anything or anyone hijack your devotion. Mind versus heart. The mind knows, but the heart gets caught. Have you ever known in your mind that something or someone was wrong for you, but your heart didn't want to let go? That's the danger. Your mind sees the facts. Your heart clings to the fantasy. Your mind remembers the word. Your heart remembers the feeling. Your mind wants to run. Your heart still checks if they text. That's why the Bible doesn't just say renew your mind. It also says guard your heart, because if you don't guard it, you'll be led by what you feel, not what God says. What happens when you don't guard your heart? 1. You give too much too fast. You overshare, overextend, overtrust. Then, when it crashes, you don't just grieve the loss, you grieve the part of you they were never supposed to access. 2. You make idols out of good things. It's not always a person. It could be success, ministry, control, attention, and suddenly, what started as a blessing becomes your obsession. 3. You confuse potential with peace. You see the red flags, but tell yourself, God can fix it. But God didn't ask you to rescue it. He asked you to release it. 4. Your silent conviction to protect comfort. When your heart's too invested, You start ignoring the nudge. You start defending what God is trying to deliver you from. What's really in your heart? Gut check. Ask yourself, what do I daydream about most? What do I fear losing the most? What do I hide from others because I'm afraid they'll correct me? What do I immediately justify when someone brings it up? Those answers reveal what's sitting on the throne of your heart. And if it's not Jesus, you've got an open door. Guarding your heart looks like deleting access, not because they're evil, but because they're distracting. Not sharing everything just because it feels good to be known. Praying before responding to opportunities, invites, DMs, and feelings. Checking your motivation. Am I doing this because I love God or because I need attention, validation, or revenge? Solomon didn't lose because he stopped being smart. He lost because he stopped guarding his heart. He let love override obedience. He let tolerance become idolatry. He let foreign intimacy become internal destruction. And that can be us too if we stop watching the gates. What Solomon life teaches us: wisdom is a gift, but obedience is a choice. Solomon had wisdom, but stopped submitting. God can visit you and still let you fall if you drift. God showed up twice, and Solomon still built altars to idols. Your influence doesn't mean your heart is right. You can still function in your gift while quietly falling apart. You have to guard your heart daily, not once, not monthly, not only when things feel off, every single day. Maybe you're in that Solomon season, the one where you know better, but you've been drifting. God's been tugging, but you've been justifying. You still love Him, but your loyalty is leaking. This is your wake up call. You don't have to end like Solomon. You can still come back. You can still tear down the altars and rebuild your heart. Solomon's legacy: he wrote truth, he didn't live, built temples while bowing to idols, heard God, but stopped fearing Him. And yet, God let us see it so we wouldn't repeat it. Solomon's fall was slow, but yours doesn't have to be. How will you finish? This isn't about being perfect. It's about being surrendered. It's about choosing God again and again, even when it's hard. Let your story be one where the wisdom of Solomon meets the repentance of David, where your name isn't remembered for how you started, but how you returned.